Hey everyone, welcome to Two Candlesticks inaugural YouTube video. I don't know what we're going to call this thing yet, but just conversations with people within the security industry. And so our first guest is Travis Farral with Archaea Energy. He's currently the CISO. Welcome, Travis.
Glad to be here, Matt. Thanks for having me. Should be
Yeah,
fun.
thanks for being the guinea pig to start this thing off.
Absolutely, man.
So let's just start with, how did you get into the security industry? How did you become a CISO? Let everybody understand just kind of what that journey looks like.
Yeah, so my journey started a long time ago. I didn't know that security was a job that you could do. So when I was a teenager, I did some stuff. It was the 80s. It's, what you did with modems and stuff back then. But I learned some things during that became kind of poignant later on. So first real job that I got, I worked at like software, et cetera, at the mall and was a Mac technician for a while in 1990. But like my first real job was working at Nokia, and I wasn't working in technology initially when I started. But I did quickly fall into working in technology just because I had a pretty good background on computers. I obviously had been a technician and worked in the computer space for a while. Had as part of the whole PC thing in the 80s, and had Apple IIc at home and all that fun stuff. So it was kind of natural for me to fall into like a help desk position, once I started working at Nokia. So it wasn't too long after that I just kept finding things that needed to be fixed that shouldn't be that way, that from a security perspective. Like I remember sitting down with the director of IT and explaining, like, look, any operator on the line and in the assembly line making the phones, they can absolutely get domain admin, and have access to anything in the domain. And here's all they have to do. And his face went white. And he's like, "What do we need to do to fix that?" And so I explained it to him, and we were able to get that fixed. But it was like continual things like that. And so it was only a matter of time before I ended up on the security team as they were standing up the security team there. Um, and so that really kind of launched my career, and got to live through all these advances in technology. Like around that time, Checkpoint was kind of becoming a big thing, and working at Nokia, obviously the big partnership with Nokia and Checkpoint when we bought the company in California that did, the IP, what we ultimately called the IP routing group. But, basically just checkpoint firewall on a box, is what that was. And we sold that at Nokia. So I had those everywhere. So we got stateful firewalls, went through the whole thing of IDS, we rolled out internet security systems, and then vulnerability scanning with Foundstone when that came out, so all these like innovations and things came. And, eventually just kind of ended up, leaving Nokia in 2005, but, getting into leadership, various leadership roles, doing different things, stand up socks and all that. And so kind of the rest is history. And, obviously landed to the CISO role that I'm in now. I've been in CISO titled roles since 2018, I believe. But it's been an interesting ride. And throughout it all, I never got a degree. It's all been just, lots of late nights and lots of studying, and trying to keep up with all the changes all the time. I
Yeah.
remember waking up one day and realizing, wait a minute, uh, we can have vulnerabilities in processors now. Like I don't remember. It was like 10 years ago, I guess, when that fun happened. But you know how it is. You're in the industry. I don't have any preconceived notions about what I might read, 10 minutes from now about security. I'd be like, oh, okay, so that's what we're dealing with now. Great.
Right. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I think a lot of us started off in that help desk world where you're just learning how things work. And another fun fact, I don't have a security or IT degree either. My undergrad degree was in history. I'm pointing that they're all over the place. So it's pretty interesting just to talk to people and see the different backgrounds that CISOs come from because they're all different.
Yeah, it's pretty diverse. I don't know. I've run into so many. Over the years, so many people that I have tremendous respect for, just in security acumen, leadership, everything you can think of in the security industry. And it's surprising how many of them either came in like with no degree, maybe they got a degree late in life after they already had their career established, or they came in like from a completely different industry and had, maybe they had a degree, but it had like yourself, like where it had nothing to do with security.
Yeah. Do you
It
think
seems
that's
like it's common,
changed?
honestly.
So I think back when we first started, like no, there was nobody in security, or very few people in security,
That's
right?
right. I
And
didn't know you could have a job doing that, or
I still remember the first phone call I got from a recruiter asking me about doing cybersecurity, and I remember going, I don't know what that is. But it's yeah, I think back to what it was like then to what it's like now, where you have an army of kids coming out of college with very specific cybersecurity degrees. Do you think it's still sort of an option to come in from sort of outside like we did
Yeah.
today, where you have kids that are coming out like these kids at like 21, 22 are so far beyond what I was at that age. It's not even funny.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, they were like born with keyboards in their hands and stuff.
And
Like we didn't have that.
right.
You know? Yeah, it's interesting. I was talking to another CISO about this last night, about the education thing. And there's a few things happening there. I think part of it might be generational. Part of it might be just the way that they're doing the education and universities that are teaching those curriculums. But some kids, like, they go through the degree programs, maybe even come out with a master's degree, and they seem to have this belief that they're just going to sit down in front of a keyboard, get their laptop and do this job. And I don't think that they necessarily understand what the actual job is like. And some of them fall out and they wash out and they go, they go into different careers outside of their degree, which is cybersecurity based.
Right.
And I think I think a couple things about that. Like one of them, it might be just generational. Maybe they just don't realize like how crazy and how much work this field is in general. But some of it, it sort of begs the question of whether or not the universities are dialing in their preparation for these roles in the right way, because maybe they're not teaching them well to just teach them like, look, you know, you're going to get this degree, but you're basically signing up to learn for the rest of your life. It doesn't matter. It's not about CPEs. It's not about all that stuff. It's about like if you want to hang on and be okay at this job, you're going to keep learning every day, and if you're some people like that, I like that, but I don't know that people really understand coming through college that that's
Yeah.
the reality. And I'll be honest, like I get asked a lot from parents that are like, hey, my son or daughter is really interested in security. What do you suggest? And then my first thing is don't send them to college. Like if they want to get like a government job or something, they want to go work cyber in the government, yeah, absolutely send them to college. They're going to have a requirement of having to have a degree to even get into that role. But outside of that, like I don't think it's number one. I don't think it's required in a lot of cybersecurity companies, fortunately, or companies that are hiring cybersecurity roles. But two, you put yourself at a disadvantage, because you're taking yourself out of the workplace, out of hands-on experience in real enterprises for 4 to 6 years, depending on
Yeah.
where you're going. And the experience is the highest, like 100% the most important thing. So
Yeah.
if I'm sitting there as a hiring person and I'm looking at two kids that are both, 24 years old, one of them has, some amazing degrees and stuff, understands some things, but really doesn't have any real world experience. And here's someone else who knows roughly the same, maybe minus a few things that they would have got in college, but they have like 5, 6, 4 years of experience. I'm going to look at the experienced kid, over the college kid. That's just the way it is,
Yeah. Yeah. I think if you're going to go to college, you've got to find the right internships. And, I know at my last job, we would bring in interns and then keep them around part time while they were in school, giving them 15, 20 hours a week. And
Yep,
that's the balance you got to strike as a
100%.
young person. And you have to be working some way because by the time you learn it in school, it's obsolete by the time you get out.
Yeah,
And
that's the other problem. Yeah, I mean, there's certain core things like TCP/IP is TCP/IP. You know, the core
yeah,
things like that I think are static enough that they can be taught and still relevant when kids get out. But the, you know, I don't know. I think what you suggest though is the right answer because I've given that advice too, where the parents have said, you know, we really want to send them to college. We don't like the idea of not having them with a degree, and I get that. And in those cases, I absolutely tell them like, you know, well, they need to be able to work somehow at some point, you know, in a tech related role as much as they can, whether it's an internship or you know working somewhere part time, you know, even if it's just like a technician or something, like just to get your hands into it and hear what people are, you know, feel a little bit of what people are dealing with, and hopefully get to clean some malware and some stuff like that
yeah,
along the way. You know,
yeah. I think it's important for kids not only to get the real world experience of like looking at malware or looking at packet analysis or whatever, but it's also important to just see how business works
yep,
and how security needs to enable the business and work with the business versus like we have this piece of data and we just need to secure it at all costs, which is typically what they think coming out of college. And so being able to tell them like, hey, you know, there's a risk balance that we're trying to find, right? Where the business needs to do these things and we have to figure out how best to secure it. It doesn't mean it's going to be completely secure because it never is, but how do we secure it that aligns to a risk tolerance? And I know at least when I talk to these kids, most of them have never really thought about anything that way.
that's true.
It's most of like I have this piece of data. I need to make sure it's secure from literally every bad person on the planet.
Right.
Versus like this thing has to be somewhat open because people need to use it. Right?
Yeah, yeah, that's a really good point though. I think the skills are part of it, especially early on in your career, because likely you're going to have to use those skills in whatever
Yeah.
role you're in, you know, SOC level one or, you know, help desk, whatever. But the business part is definitely something that like that honestly if I'm interviewing like somebody that has a little bit of understanding, a little bit of business acumen, and like at least a respect for what burden that they're putting on the business or that their actions have on getting the business back up and running or helping them avoid disruptions or something, like having that awareness is a huge plus.
Yeah,
And you know it's you know, maybe a hat tip to the, you know, universities that, you know, maybe teaching some of that in their curriculum. But for those that aren't, maybe they should.
I agree. I agree. So how has the world of being a CISO changed over the last like 10 years?
Wow, that's a good question. The easy answer is, you know, we'll look at Joe Sullivan and, you know, we look at what happened with him and, you know, more recently with the solar wind stuff and everything. And while those, you know, those are, you know, oft talked about, especially recently, impacts to the CISO role, I think to me, it's all just part of the journey that the role itself is taking to maturity, if you will. Because I think like, you know, early on, it was more when, at least when I got involved in being a CISO, working with other CISOs and stuff, the it was kind of more a director of security role that just had a, you know, chief information something in front of it, you know. But I think it's what's happened now and what's happening, and even with these legal challenges and stuff, is it's the journey that we have to take to get people, you know, people that are in these roles and people that are seeking to get into these roles getting, and then people that work with them, you know, so like leadership, executive leadership boards, you know, if boards are involved in the discussions with the CISOs, like getting everybody on the same page as to what the role really is and what the requirements for the role are. Because one thing I can say pretty much ubiquitously, and you know, this isn't to throw every single CISO under the bus or anything, but we're not good at being business leaders. You know, a lot of us came up through maybe technical ranks. Maybe we were SOC analysts at one point and kind of worked our way up in our career through management, and now we have a CISO title. Or maybe we came in through GRC and we did a lot of audit and other types of work and policies and all that. It doesn't really matter. Uh, when you get to the point where you're a chief, you know, you're considered, or at least your expectation is that you're an actual officer of the company, whether you are or not, being able to speak coherently to the CFO about business related matters and the CEO about business related matters is key. You know, otherwise you don't really deserve to
Yeah.
have a spot at the table, to be honest. Like screaming that you want a spot at the table and you know you can't do things because you don't have a spot at the table,
Yeah.
and meanwhile you don't have like you don't know how to read like financial statements or anything basic like that in the world of business and finance, like you're not ready for that. You're asking for it, but you're not ready for it. That I think is the big thing that I think is different is we're starting to get into that space where, you know, those are going to be expectations for people stepping into the CISO roles. And it probably is already that way for the like,
The
you know,
big
if you're
ones.
in a Fortune 50
Yeah.
company and you're a CISO there, like those expectations probably exist, but to see that trickle down into the smaller like Fortune 1000s and things like that, I think still has yet to happen.
Yeah, I've seen that happen in the last few years with financial services, Fortune 500s. It's if you can't talk about how your company makes money, you're not gonna work. And it's what I've been telling a lot of people as I give advice on how to interview for CISOs or how to interview for director of security roles. It's you should ask whoever you're interviewing, how did your last company make money? And it'll tell you pretty quickly if they can actually answer that or not. And so
Absolutely.
anybody coming up has to be able to do that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. It's going to be an interesting, you know, coming years, I think, as I think it's good. It's you know, the challenges that come along with it, it's all just part of the growing process. And hopefully on the other side of that, we do have a seat at the table, but we've also earned it.
That's right. That's right. So one other thing I wanted to ask you about is where we met. We met through teammate summits and in the VC world, and there's always lots of security leaders who are asking, "How do I get involved in that?" And they think they want to be advisors to startups, and I think sometimes people realize they don't want to be, and sometimes people realize, yeah, this is a lot of fun. So I wanted to ask you, just how did you get involved in the VC world? I know you do other ones outside of teammate, but
Sure.
how did you get into that world? Was it has it turned out to be what you thought it was when you first got into it? And what kind of advice would you give to other leaders that are looking to do more of that?
This is good. I'm glad we're talking about this. For me, I just kind of fell into it. I had liked working with early stage startups before. I hadn't like started talking to VCs for that purpose, but the discussions that I had with folks who are either like looking to start a company or had you know recently started one and were you know pretty early stage and maybe pre-seed round you know kind of stuff. I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed being able to take the experience that I had and be able to give them advice. And you know, in the case where whatever they're building had relevancy to things I was trying to solve in my own business, selfishly, it's kind of a mutually beneficial relationship, right? Because now I have their ear at a time when what I say can be translated into product very quickly, and so I can kind it's kind of like a grocery list of like problems I'm having. I don't have a good tool for in my
Yeah.
existing stack. I can now influence this company to build exactly what I'm looking for. And it just happens, hopefully, that that helps other companies looking for those to solve those same problems. So it's great to be able to contribute to the community and to the industry that way, and to these entrepreneurs who are taking the big risk of trying to start something and going out on a limb like that. But I'm also serving my company well because now I've potentially for less money than it would be from you know buying the same solution from some big platform company, and so I'm saving money and also getting exactly what I want. So it works well for serving my role as well. So Obviously on paper, it makes sense that you would just go start talking to the VCs directly about some of the, basically the same thing. I did not actually make that leap in my head. It was only because a friend of mine, Gotti, he and I ran into each other, became good friends, way back in like the 2015, 2016 range, something like that. When he had started a small company, well, he sold his company and ended up getting a job at Team 8, and he introduced me to Team 8 and said, hey, they have this thing called the CISO Village. You really need to take a look at it. And so he stepped me in and had, introduced me to folks. And it turned out like, to me, it was like, wow, this is way better, because now I'm talking to folks that are ideating ahead of even creating a company, talking, getting, intros to these CEOs of very early stage companies, because Teammate's an early stage VC. And that led me into looking at some of the other VCs that are out there and developing relationships with them where it made sense. And yeah, it's great. I can kind of pick and choose
Yeah.
which startup companies I'm interested in talking to that solve problems in my current role, or say no thanks. We don't have any exposure in the space that you're working, and stuff like that. It's just great, and I think if I was to give advice to other CISOs, I would say you should consider talking to early stage startups, period, whether or not you're talking to, doing that through VC relationships or not. Um, because I think that can be very rewarding, both for yourself, for the entrepreneurs, and for your own company. But look at talking to VCs as well, but shop the VCs. There's a lot of VCs out there, and they're not all cut from the same cloth.
Yeah. Speaking of not all cut from the same cloth, I won't mention any names, but I think everybody would know who we're talking about. What are some of the things that they should look out for, right? What should CISOs look at and go, "Ooh, I want to stay away from that," or things that they should just be aware of as they start that journey?
Yeah, that's really the elephant in the room, I think, when you start talking about relationships with VCs, and even just early stage startups in general. So it's an interesting environment, because when you think about it, if you're a startup CEO and you've got a ton of pressure on you, probably, like there's not that many bootstrap ones out there that we all hear about. A lot of times they're going through the VC journey, where they get maybe angel round, seed round through VCs, and then a round, and on and on and on, and hopefully exit somehow eventually. In order to go through that, even to go from seed to A, like you have to show a certain amount of growth, that you've matured your company from just an idea into, hey, you have product now, and the pressure to sell is very high. And you know rightfully so, the relationships they build with CISOs early on like that, they highly appreciate. And when you look forward at like the monetary, like just the reward that comes to those entrepreneurs, the CEO and the other startups, or the other startup founders, you know, they appreciate and would have liked to have shared in their, with those who really helped them. And maybe there's like a handful of CISOs or other business people that really were key to them getting the success that they got. And I think it's natural for them to have wanted to at least have shared some of the rewards in that journey. So it's not necessarily like anything nefarious or anything, like they're just trying to be good human beings, and be like, look, I just got X million dollars because I sold my company. And honestly, I would not have been able to do that without like these 5 or 10 CISOs or other business leaders that we worked with along the way. I'd love to be able to have shared some of that with them. But at the same time, that does, from just an enterprise business, legality situation, CISOs, before you even start talking to any of these VCs or any of these startups or anything like that, you need to understand what you're ethics and compliance, your ENC status is. Like, what is the expectations at your company? What do you need to disclose? When do you need to disclose? Understanding the rules of the road with that is going to keep you out of trouble.
Yep.
And playing by the rules, a lot of times it's not a big deal as long as you disclose. So go through the disclosure, for anything that you're getting, or just steer away from that stuff. For myself, like I just don't bother with it. I don't do any kind of like advisory work, on an official level where I'm being compensated for it or something like that. I haven't signed any paper with anybody where where I would have to disclose, because my perspective is I don't even want to be on that radar. I don't want general counsel and CEO or whoever else
Yeah.
is party to all that knowing Travis Farrell's name, because I keep putting in these disclosures all the time of
Yeah.
things that I'm doing that are kind of like, really. So that's the biggest thing. That said, if the situation is the business is okay with those, like, hey, if it's a paid advisory, that's fine as long as you're not buying it, or as long as you weren't part of the purchase decision, process. You can play by those rules and you can get some kind of compensation from these relationships, and it's to each their own. And I would almost put the question back on you, because I think you have recently been involved in some advisory work. And my question to you, as somebody who hasn't participated in those type of things, like, what do you think the value of that is for you personally? Like, not talking about the compensation thing, but just being involved with it as an official advisor. What is that like? What is the benefit that you've seen from that so far? And do you think it's worth, like, time commitments or anything like that that's involved?
Yeah, I'm supposed to ask the questions, Travis.
No, no, come on, man. I'm curious. I want to know this. And I know I'm not the only one who wants to know this.
I think so I would say this. I think um there was different types of advisor roles. And the problem is that every startup, every company has a different definition of what they want out of an advisor. And so anybody who is going down that route of where you want to be an official advisor for somebody, like one of the first things you've got to do is have that conversation of what does that word advisor mean to you, to the CEO?
That's
Because
fair.
there are some CEOs that want to bring you in as really just a glorified salesperson, right?
Every time. That would be
They
my expectation, honestly.
right, like
Is that what
most
is their motivation for doing it? And I think in a lot of cases it's they want you, they want your network, they
that's
want your budget.
the number one key is your network, right? So they're less. Well, I was just say not. I'm not going to generalize. Most of them are less concerned about your specific company buying them. They will push pretty hard to do some kind of design partnership or something like that with you.
Right.
Design partnerships are typically fine. You don't have to really disclose anything there because you're just working with them. You're
Yeah.
not in just in and of itself. You're not getting equity out of it. You're not doing. You're just partnering with them, which is what you talked about, where your company's benefiting from helping design something that's going to fit for what you need. They're benefiting because they're getting real world feedback, right? So it's a really good relationship. Where it becomes interesting is when you become a official equity advisor, then you have to disclose it, right? And just what you're talking about. You have to fill out
100%.
your
Yeah.
outside business activities stuff. You have to get your whoever you report to's got to sign off on it.
Yep.
Usually your chief of compliance or legal or something, whoever that person is going to have to sign off on it, and you're going to get watched, right? Everything you do. And then
Yep.
you're going to have to recuse yourself from anything to do with that company. So if you're a CISO and it's a security vendor, like you have to like basically say this person on my team is going to handle that, and I'm out. Like I can't be
Yeah.
involved in it.
There you go. Of
There's ways to do it. It does become a little bit of a pain because you have to just make sure every I is dotted, every T is crossed.
course.
But I think it can be really beneficial for a couple different reasons, especially if you find the right advisor relationship.
Hmm.
Like I have some where I am heavily, heavily involved. I sit in on all the board meetings. I'm meeting with the head of marketing. I'm meeting with the head of product. I'm meeting with the chief revenue officer. So I'm talking with them about the strategy for how to talk to CISOs, how to market it,
Hmm.
how to name products, how the product should work, like where to invest. Like those are my favorite ones because you feel a part of the company. You feel like you're really making an impact
Sure,
on where they're going. I have some other ones which are quite frankly not ones that I really love doing, but it's where I see a product and I'm like, this is a really cool product. I believe in this product
sure.
and I want to get the word out about it. But all I'm doing is just using my network to make introductions and try to help them grow that way. Like they aren't really using me for more for whatever reason. Sometimes they can't. They're not big enough and they don't have enough time to really take in any more feedback from an advisor. Sometimes that's just really all they want. It's just more they want to build pipeline. And so
Does
you
that?
have to, as a CISO, decide like, am I going to spend my time doing that? Do I want to give them access to my network? Because one thing I've learned as a security leader or any kind of leader is your network is probably the most valuable thing you have. And so
100%.
you have to protect it. If you start just letting every Tom, Dick, and Harry have access to your network, people are going to stop listening to you. Your network's going to fall apart.
That's right.
And so that's probably one of the biggest things is now I don't take any more advisor roles where I'm just using my network. Like I don't want to do that. I want the advisor roles where I'm involved, really involved in the company to help them get to where they need to get to.
That makes sense. I mean, that's where my heart would be if I was ever to take a regular like full blown advisor role. I got a question though, like the distinction between those two scenarios that you painted. Is that really a question of maturity? Like where the latter, where you're more or less just kind of a paid salesperson to get access to your network or whatever. Is it because the company in question is beyond the like design partnership stage and they're kind of more into the maturity where they're more at the growth stage and they're just looking to sell at this point? They've already built the platform.
I've actually seen it the opposite. The ones that are more mature want you to be more involved.
That's
It's the
interesting.
really early ones that just want pipeline. And I think it's like what you
Interesting.
talked about where it's trying to get the highest valuation possible.
Yeah, that makes
And
sense.
they're just so singular focused on getting their valuation up, getting clients that they just for whatever reason they don't want to take on the advisors that's more involved. They almost see more value in somebody who can bring them, X number of leads per month than somebody who can help them with a better
Hmm.
product. Um, so I know that's not 100% always the case, but just,
Sure.
my experience anecdotally, it seems to be the sort of opposite way where
It's really interesting. I would have lost the bet on that. So, but it sounds like on the ones where you actually are engaged, you're actually talking to people in the business as an advisor, giving advice, seeing your ideas translated into actions taken by the business. I could see, hey, that would be something I would be much more interested in if I was going to do something like that. Because to me, that's what motivates me more than the equity and all that other stuff
yeah.
anyway. But it sounds like it's an actual board role. Like it's not like a full blown, like you're not on the board of directors, but you're on a board of advisors and it's an actual board position. Like you're just it's not an advisory board in name only, is what
Right.
I'm saying.
Exactly. It's a real one.
Yeah, yeah,
Hey,
exactly.
those are the ones you want. I think everybody would agree those are the best ones, and it's just a matter of finding them. So my advice to anybody getting into it is just be picky with
Sure.
with the ones you decide that you're going to get involved in. So either make sure it's exactly the type of advisor role you want, or it's a company that you just completely believe in and you just want to be a part of it in some way. But
That's
don't
cool.
I kind of made that mistake early on where I was just like, yeah, I'll take anything. Like I just want to get involved in it. And I learned some lessons in that. And
Sure.
yeah,
That's
that's
why we're talking about it now, because you can
yeah.
share those lessons with folks like me who haven't done it yet. Yeah, I don't know if I'll ever, do a full blown like, are you like? it's actual the equity you get. Like, are you on the cap table in these situations, or how
So,
does that work when you're an advisor?
yeah, it just depends on different ones. Some of them you're getting like equivalent of like RSUs. Some of them you're getting just options. Like it's just it like this is the other thing I've learned. Everything in life is negotiable.
Nice.
And this is this was something that took me a while to sort of wrap my brain around because I would see it and I'd be like, oh, okay, you can kind of get what you want. But it didn't really click probably 18 months ago where it really, maybe not even that long ago, somewhere around year and a half ago. It just something clicked in my head and I was just like, wow, like really, like there's no rules to anything.
That's good to know.
And so, though the CEOs will have their own ideas of like, this is what I want this
Yeah.
to be. But like, if they want you bad enough, like if you bring enough value to what they're doing, like it's all negotiable.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
so I think,
that's really good advice. Because I don't know that I would have necessarily like just my inexperience, like if I was, in a situation where I actually wanted to go down the path of getting officially a, advisor role, I wouldn't have known. I would have just assumed like, oh, this is the paper, this is what I have to sign, I can have my legal look at it and maybe, do some red lines like normal, if there's some stuff in there that they're not cool with, but I would not have thought to look at the actual terms that, in terms of like equity or whatever, and been like, yeah, I don't want options. I want RSUs or, whatever, or I
yeah,
want, higher percentage or whatever. Wouldn't have known that was inherently on the table. So
yeah,
it's
well, everything's on the table.
everything's on the table. That's what I'm talking
Everything.
about.
I mean, it's the same thing when you negotiate for a CISO role or any other new role,
That's
right?
true. Yeah.
Like we forget that like you can actually negotiate for literally anything. Like, I
Yeah,
mean,
that's awesome.
it's I think it's something to remember. Like, I mean, I've seen CISOs negotiate for parking spots.
Why not,
You
man?
know, we just don't think about it, right? I mean, you can ask for all kinds of stuff. Like you can ask for, like I've seen CISOs that won't take a job unless they get X amount of travel budget every year. Like, I mean, it's just
That's
I
interesting.
think it's one of the things I've just learned through experience is just like don't just accept what somebody offers you as like this is what we're kind of constrained to. I mean, be creative.
I
And
like
like
it.
so that helps you sometimes when if we're getting a little different, but like when you're talking about any kind of job, like sometimes the CISO title or the CISO salary isn't exactly what you want, or so negotiate on other things.
So let's pivot because I want to talk about the other situation that happens where you're not talking directly to the company, but you have a relationship with the VC, and the VC is giving you incentive to, some kind of agreement to be an advisor with the VC, and maybe they're giving you carry in the fund or something like that as compensation for your time, and maybe they reward you for certain activities. I know this exists. I've seen some agreements that have come over from certain VCs. It's to me like I don't know how in the world I could ever justify that. With I talked to other, this is kind of the talk of the town lately, and I've had a lot of discussions with other CISOs on this topic, and some of them, have pointed out like, look, it's actually easier because you don't have a your business is not going to have a financial relationship with the VC, right? So it's so the conflict of interest doesn't necessarily exist, and I'm like, okay, that's
I don't
that's
agree with that.
stretching things a little bit
I don't
because
agree with that at all.
what they're rewarding you for is absolutely things that relate to your job.
Yeah.
So for you to actually get some of the rewards that they're offering you, you're having to talk to companies that absolutely do apply to your role. And if you make purchase decisions for those companies, now you're in trouble. Like now
Mhm.
that's absolutely a conflict of interest.
Yeah. I mean, if a VC's got you essentially on the payroll and
Hmm.
you're incentivized, for their portfolio companies to get sales and your company buys some of those portfolio companies,
Yep.
it's 100% a conflict of interest.
I don't even want my name near anything like that. That's, you
No,
know,
so I think as an active CISO, you it goes back to what we were talking about before. You have to disclose that stuff, and you have to make sure that you're not the one making decisions.
Yeah, it's the only way. You'd have to recuse yourself from, and here's why I don't do that. Um, I absolutely want to be like it's my responsibility to be a party to
Right.
some of these decisions, right? Now, granted, there is something to be said for, hey, I have a team, the team knows, they dig into things. But here's the bottom line, like I do trust my team and I do trust them to make good decisions on things, but they don't always have that business acumen that I do. And sometimes they're looking very short term.
Yeah.
Does it solve this problem? Does it check this box? Yes, yes, yes. Uh, I'm looking at things a little differently a lot of times. I'm looking at the team, the support, like what's the leadership? What are they about to have an exit? Is it going to be instantly we're dealing with other people now? Like those things matter to me because I don't want to, have this thing in here, have them, get acquired by some giant company in 6 months,
Yep.
and the writing was on the wall before we bought them, and like there's a lot of things like so I actually do want to be a party to these decisions and I don't want to recuse myself from them because I feel like the company is paying me to make sure that those decisions are made properly. That's the company's money. It's their capital that's being used on the
Right.
table to make these purchases. So maybe I don't have anything. Maybe I'm not going to override or steer different the decision that the team makes, but I at least want it to be on the
Well,
table that I can make that decision if I have to, or if I feel like it's
well,
the right thing for the
yeah, and
company.
it becomes interesting because if you start to have to recuse yourself from almost
Hmm.
anything, right? So if you, some of these security VCs, right? So if you get in that situation, like, what are you buying? Like,
Yeah,
because they cover everything, right? They're going to
they
cover
do.
response, they're going to cover IAM, they're going to everything. So,
DSPM,
right,
CSPM, like all the new buzzwords of,
exactly. So then somebody at some point goes along with, why are you here?
yeah, 100%. Like we can
Because
just, your team's doing all the work, like,
it's a tricky spot. I would have a hard time as an active CISO. I think you'd have to find ones that are not entirely security, that maybe have one or two security portfolio companies, but they maybe have other things in the portfolio that have nothing to do with what you do
hmm
that you can just kind of help them with, or help them
Then
with
what's
their
the
security.
value of them making that relationship with you in the first place, right? Like, let's be
Mhm.
honest, like the reason that these VCs want this is they want you specifically because they know that you can make the decisions on which
Right.
products you're looking at, which ones you're talking about with your friends and peers in the industry, and which ones you're actually going to buy. That's all they care about. And
And
that's
look,
what they're trying to incentivize.
we have to be transparent about it, right? Like most things, I'm not. This is not even security. This is everything. Most decisions around what you're going to buy comes down to relationships.
Oh, yeah,
Like
absolutely.
they just do. If you have a really good relationship with a sales rep and you trust them, you're more likely to buy from them, right? So
That is true.
and
That
that's
is true.
it's just a fact, and it's not a security thing. It's an everybody thing.
That's true.
And so if you extrapolate that out, where you have, say, a VC who builds really good relationships with hundreds of CISOs,
Yep.
then by default, whether there's equity involved or not, most of those are going to lean to buying more from them, right? Their portfolio companies.
Yeah.
If all things being equal, they're going to go with the ones they like better as people, is how
Yeah.
things typically go, right? And so then you layer on equity or or carry or whatever,
Yeah.
it becomes you just there's no way you could argue that you're not influenced by that. Like I just don't know how you could do it. And so look, people have figured that out, and it is the reality of the world we live in. And I think as an active CISO, you just have to be really really aware of that,
Yeah.
and make sure you're openly transparent to your company about what's going on. And then that's a conversation you can have with your company. Are they comfortable with it or not? Because some companies are going to be okay with it as long
hmm
as you're disclosing, and there's going to be other companies who are like, absolutely not. You're not doing
That's
that.
absolutely true. Well, to me, the other aspect too is, I'm everything that I do is going to be watched. It's just like when you have kids, like it's not really what you say, tell them, hey, don't do that, take that out of your mouth, whatever. they're gonna watch what you do and they're gonna mimic what you do, period.
That's
There's
right.
nothing you can do about that. It's the same thing with our teams. Like they're looking to us, like we're the role model for the team, and maybe they have aspirations of becoming a
Right.
CISO themselves. And if they see you behaving in these ways, that they're learning that that's how you be a CISO, you know. And I'm like I have an awareness to that, and I'm like, and I don't do everything perfect all the time, and I'm like, crap, I shouldn't have done that, because like now they're gonna look at that and think that's how you do stuff. I make those mistakes. But to me, like these inappropriate relationships, and I'm calling it what it is, like that's definitely something I don't want them seeing that A is how our industry works, and B, that they can go mimic that later on in their life when they
Yeah.
become a CISO.
It's going to be really interesting how this changes because of the most recent news about, CISOs being, I don't want to say paid, but highly incentivized to
Get paid.
to,
Yeah.
to either buy things or POC things or whatever, right? And you can see some CISOs that have like, 7, 8 products from one VC, and we hear stories around.
Exactly.
We see like, a CISO that has 4 different solutions for the same thing because they got incentivized to buy them all, which
Yeah.
is which is just it's wrong.
Yeah.
There's
That
no there's no other way to put it. And now that this is all becoming public, it is really curious to see over the next 12, 18 months, because it takes forever for anything to really change. But like, are there going to be new regulations? Are there going to
Yep.
be new rules of how to operate? And so I'm fascinated to just see how that changes
Same.
and how the VCs react to it, how the private equity companies react to it, and frankly, how the CISOs react to it. Because I think there's a lot of CISOs that have frankly gotten rich off of this model for the
I know there
last
has been,
10,
yeah.
15 years. And, we all know some of them.
Yeah, we do.
And, we're all a little bit jealous of them, but but it
At the
is.
same time, yeah.
Right, but it is what it is, and
Yeah.
you have to make a decision on where you're comfortable, just like your company does too. But yeah, it'll be an interesting year or so, just seeing how it plays out.
Yeah, I definitely want to see how things go too. I think there's more news to hit yet, for one, and I think as some of the bigger publications start making noise about it, I think you're going to start seeing interest from regulatory organizations and government agencies and stuff, to start digging into, especially where you're dealing with a publicly traded company. Like I think that's where those conflicts of interest, they can impact stockholders, and I think that's where you're going to see some very serious interest and possible
Yeah,
like regulatory changes around that stuff going
yeah,
forward. But the other thing too is, this is a point that someone else made, is that what you're describing is not something that's unique to security.
no,
Like this is how the world goes around.
it is.
Like you think that so and so companies, giant, Fortune 10 company, like's decision to partner with this one, blah, 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 didn't have like some inappropriate things going on behind the scenes, even though they
Yeah,
have ethics, even, and all these other rules internally. And he's like, it happens all the time. And I'm like, I do get that. And perception is reality, right? Like when
yeah,
you see, like what you're pointing out, like if, everybody knows that CISO A has relationships with these VC firms, and you see their entire stack is full of,
yeah.
like products from one portfolio. You can start making some assumptions, and I know I fall into that. And it's almost like guilty until proven innocent.
Right,
Like
right,
you got to prove to me you're not getting compensated for
right,
that, right? But I
right.
think we need to be aware of that too. Like if we're going to have like even above board relationships with VCs, um, we do need to take care that we're handling those relationships well. And if we just happen to like a couple of the products in their portfolio, make sure that there's plenty of documentation and things to back up
That's
the
right.
decisions that were made, so that if somebody does want to call you out on that, like you've got a perfectly good 2 legs to stand on.
That's right. Cool. Well, I think we've gone for quite a while, so I don't want to have people watching for an hour. But I want to. There's 2 questions I want to ask you just to sort of wrap up. The first one is, um, what do you think makes a good CISO?
That's probably the hardest question that you've asked so far today. I think ability to listen across the board, listening to other CISOs and peers in the industry and their network, listening to their team and the people that they work with and internally, even outside of their team, like the business and so on. Because I don't know how you can be effective if you're just all in your own head. Like, I get influenced a lot by my team and by yourself and by other CISOs that I talk with. I don't think I have all the answers at all. I think it's equal, like listening, humility, recognizing you're not all that, like you're gonna make mistakes. We all do. There's zero CISOs out there that have made zero mistakes. No way. Nobody's selling me
Yeah.
on that. Um, and so I think those qualities, if they have those qualities, like that goes a long way to like everything else kind of falls into place. Like maybe they don't have good technical acumen, but if they're doing these other things, right, if they're listening well and they can piece things together and they maintain humility, like they're more likely to execute good judgment, in my opinion. And and I think ultimately that's what it's all about at the end of the day.
Perfect. All right, last question. Best piece of advice you ever got?
All right. Um, I got two actually, and they both happened when I worked at Nokia way back when I was still pretty young and malleable. The mail administrator, and I still know this guy. I haven't talked to him in a long time. I was complaining about the amount of mail in my inbox one day, and he sat in the cube right behind me. He's like, Travis, let me show you something. He's like, come here. And I went over there, and he did Control A, and he deleted his email. And this is the MS Mail days. So this wasn't like Outlook. You just
Yeah.
remove it from trash and all that. So he like blew it away, and he's like, look, he's like, don't freak out, man. He's like, the important stuff always comes back. Don't let the pile in there freak you out. And there were so many lessons in that I apply everywhere and not just email. I've taken that really to heart, and so there's that. The second one came right around that time too. One of my early bosses that I worked for at Nokia, he said, "Look, Travis, because we were talking about an opportunity for me to step into a different role, and I was like, kind of talking over the details about it in the painter, and he's like, look, man, don't let the pay be a thing. You do where you really feel like you want to go. Like, what do you want to do that job? Is that something that excites you? Are you passionate about that? It's like, don't worry about the money. The money will always come." And so I did. I ended up taking a role that there was other opportunities where there was more money, but I never looked back and was not sad about it at all. I ended up getting like a random bump by the VP at some point, just because he thought I was doing a good job, and kind of got me into the territory I would have been in anyway. So it's worked out that way time and time again in my life. So don't chase the money is the object. It's chase your passion. The money comes because if you're passionate about it, you're gonna be good at it.
That's great advice. That second one especially is one I heard. I don't even remember where I heard it, but somewhere along the way, similar to you, where it's just opportunities over money every time,
Every time.
and it always works out. So, anyways, thanks Travis. Thanks for joining us, and yeah, we'll get this posted soon. Hope everybody enjoys it. Have a good day.
I had a good time, man. Thanks for having me on.